Okay.
All right. So we did, I fully admit, we dabbled a little bit into chapter 28 at the end of last time. But today is kind of a story that continues on the like fluid motion from where we were. So I'm curious what you all have been thinking about, and because it's been a little while, we took a week off last week. What do you all remember from the drama between these two brothers and the back and forth and the competition and the marriage and the like prospect of marriage, the blessing, all of that? What do you all remember from what we talked about 2 weeks ago?
Just the deviousness.
The deviousness, yeah.
Mhm.
We had the conflict between Esau and Jacob, and Jacob was favored by his mother, Esau by his father, and Jacob kind of was the winner in the competition between who was going to continue on and carry on the lineage and the business end of managing a community kind of a thing. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and let somebody else pick up.
Yeah, yeah.
You're talking about last time's 28 was last time.
Just recalling a bit.
Oh, okay. There's this trickster theme, and he's a trickster, but he's about to get paid back, and it goes back and forth for a while. I'm curious about the function of that particular characteristic in this story. I mean, it makes him seem human, but it seems that of course, Laban is a kind of a nasty character, so maybe you have to do that. But
so I'm going to. I hear your question. We're not going to talk about that for a little bit, but it's an important thing to understand, especially for the Jewish self-conception and kind of how or that understanding. The short version of it is actually a joke that they make, or that I've heard a lot of my Jewish friends make about their holidays, that all their holidays are based around, they tried to kill us, it didn't work, let's eat. And because they have a lot of holidays, anything from like Passover, which is literally Egypt tried to kill us, it didn't work, let's eat.
Yeah.
But so a few holidays are like that, and it's just part of it that it's like we've had to do what we've had to do to survive, and that trickster mentality gets worked in. Larry, I saw you try to jump in.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering what the purpose was, leading up to this. It was pretty clear that Isaac favored Esau. I mean, that was his favorite. Yet in the end, it's Jacob that gets his blessing and gets sent off, Now, why that strange sort of circumstance that, the less favored son wins all the marbles.
Yeah. That's sort of part of it too.
Yeah. What happens when the desires of humans goes up against what seems like the divine order of things? There's almost an element of like destiny that's especially in our story today. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. Like, why did the story set this conflict up this way to begin with? Almost.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other initial thoughts about, or like where we're going, or things we definitely want to discuss in our scripture, the part that we're reading for today?
In chapter 28?
Mm-hmm.
Am I on the right one? Okay. When we get down to, the end of it, verse 15, I have something I want to talk about then, but there's a lot before that. I just don't want to forget about verse 15.
Okay.
Oh, this is when he Okay, this is the last story.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, got it, okay. I'm always a couple of chapters ahead, so I forget which one we're supposed to read.
That's fair. Okay. Any other things? Anything else that you want to make sure that you all want to make sure we touch on? All right, let's go ahead and jump in. We're gonna rewind just a tiny bit and we talked, like I said, we talked about it a little bit 2 weeks ago. But let's start at verse 1 and kind of see this because it does set up a different scenario. So I brought it up last time and kind of grouped it in with the other set because it's continuing to talk about Jacob's reason for leaving. This, as we kind of mentioned, this is a different tradition. As we've talked about how some stories, there's multiple versions and we smush them together. This is seen as almost an edited version that was also included. My notes say it's from the priestly source. Take that with what you want. But what we see is Isaac calls Jacob and blesses him and charges him to go because you shouldn't marry one of the Canaanites. Don't marry Hittite. You go back to our people and marry a good girl is kind of what it said, which is an entirely different explanation of why Jacob is going north than you tricked your brother out of a blessing and now you have to run for your life.
Oh.
And so I know we've mentioned it sometimes of the repetitiousness of Genesis at times. This is just another situation where we see that we're going to give a different explanation as to why he goes. And one that's a little bit nicer. It doesn't implicate his mother. And instead, Abraham just blesses him and sends him off.
So it's another way of getting him out of town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Can we get rid of the feedback?
Okay. Let's see. I think the best way, I'm sorry to always have to do this. The easiest way to get rid of feedback instead of fussing with everyone's audio is just to make sure you're on mute until you make a comment. Sorry to do that.
Yeah,
I know it's
let's do
annoying.
that.
If you have a keyboard, I believe the space bar takes you on and off mute. At least that's what I was told once upon a time.
You want us on mute?
Yeah, because we're getting some audio feedback.
Okay, I don't even know how to do it on here. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, here we are.
Okay.
It's whatever setup that Mary Ellen has that does it.
Okay. All right.
What she's on a different, whatever she's using for her sound is
Okay.
different from what everybody, it's much louder and it gives that feedback.
Interesting.
Well, let's try it if it's just me that mutes. I am on a Chromebook, which is not the quality of your computers, but if it's me, then, when I wave, I'll just unmute and join the conversation.
Okay.
Is there some way you can turn down the volume of your transmission?
Volume control.
Yeah, I can try that.
Because I think that's the problem. You're overstressing your audio output.
That could be, Larry.
Let's see. Why?
All right, how's this?
Say something.
Are you getting any feedback now?
You're still loud.
Okay.
All right, let me.
Let's
Hang
pause.
on.
Mary
Let's
Ellen,
just move
if you
on.
are willing to stay on afterwards, let's fix this not in Bible study and we can try to get you squared away so we don't have this issue again.
Okay.
All right. All right. But for now, since it does seem to be your computer giving feedback, just wave for mute and unmute. Does that work?
I will.
All right. Thanks so much.
Uh,
I will say I have one computer that does audio fine and my home laptop for some reason has the same
Yeah,
feedback
they're,
problem.
they're all different. They all.
Yeah. All right. So what we were talking about though is Jacob being blessed. In verse 4, we see he gives you the blessing of Abraham and your offspring with you so that you may take possession of the land, and then he is sent away. So that a little bit cleaner of a rationale, right, of why he leaves.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of a speed run since we've already touched on it. So starting in verse 6, we see his brother's response to this. So if the reason Jacob is sent away is because he needs to marry a good girl, Esau, the notes in my commentary were saying that in this version, by marrying someone outside of the family, Esau in a way has already forfeited the patriarchal blessing. Since he didn't do the thing that you were supposed to do, it's almost Esau's fault in this kind of version. And so he tries to make things right. And what's his solution?
He goes find somebody that does and adds her on.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he doesn't just go, he doesn't like try to follow Jacob to Laban's family. He actually reaches out to Ishmael and marries his Ishmael's daughter.
Yeah.
So does this actually, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is this of a solution? Do you give him an A for trying, a B, or is this like a lackluster response? Yeah, Mary Ellen.
Well, he's got the problem. He already has 2 Hittite wives. You know, what's he going to do about that? That's unacceptable in this version. And so, you know, trying to dilute that by adding an acceptable wife is just kind of like, you know, kind of he's trying to make it right, but it's already wrong.
Too little, too late.
Yeah. Now Ishmael was what? Isaac's brother?
So if you remember the drama with with Abraham and Sarah trying to have a kid,
Yeah.
this is Hagar's son. So
this
it
is
is
Hagar.
a son of Abraham.
Ma'am. Okay. All
But
right.
it
But
is,
yeah, she's not, you know, so the blood is a little tainted already. I mean, it's not pure blood.
if you're going by that logic, yeah, it's not 100% covenant, because it is Abraham plus an Egyptian woman plus Ishmael's wife. And so it's like, it's still an Abrahamic descendant. It's just Abraham mixed with the other groups of people too.
Absolutely. Well, you remember what the Ku Klux Klan said, you know, you only had to have 1 drop of black blood and you were a Negro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for better or for worse, it does follow a little bit along that line of we are trying to, or the covenant is evidently attempted to keep it in the family.
Mm-hmm.
So any other thoughts on this third wife of Esau? We don't get really a like commentary on how his mom and dad thought of the new wife. We know the Hittite wives made life miserable. We don't really get a commentary here. So. And so from here, we get, the story is going to fully shift into Jacob mode for a long time after this. So this, last time I brought up the idea of the Jacob cycle, that basically everything that happens at the beginning of Jacob's story then gets, like, don't think of like one version, copy paste second version. It's more like a rainbow where the things that happen at the very beginning of the story happen at the very end of the story. And this is a major point in the Jacob cycle, that what's gonna happen here happens again towards the end of Jacob's like story arc. And there's a lot of significance to what we're about to talk about, not just in like the Jacob story or even the story in Genesis, but we're going to talk a little bit about the ripple effects and actually how this somewhat affects the New Testament. So the first thing I want to bring up, because we're about to, so we see that Jacob leaves where he is going. He leaves Beersheba and goes towards Haran. The place that he is about to like have this whole mystical event, he names twice that it's Bethel. Little bit of Hebrew. Beth means house. El is God, so the house of God. You see this also in the word Bethlehem. It's Beth Lahem, which is the house of bread. And so anytime you see Beth, oh,
Oh, okay. Now it doesn't work every time I touch it. When you said Bethlehem is the house of what? I didn't get the second.
Lahem means bread.
Bread. Okay.
Bread. You like something you eat. So it's like a field where they grew a lot of grain. So it's Bethlehem. So
Okay.
any of these names that have Beth on the beginning of it means house. And it just is a handy tidbit to keep in your back pocket. Anyways, we've already come to this place once. And it's good to like, we're going to recall back to Genesis chapter 12. You don't have to flip there. I'm going to read it for you. But what we see is that this location was mentioned once or twice before. What we see is if you remember, Genesis chapter 11 is that long list of genealogy names. It's the last genealogy we got. Chapter 12 is the call of Abraham. And so Abraham goes, and in his journey towards like as he is journeying to the land of Canaan, before he goes to Egypt, he stops in Bethel and sets up an altar. There's like a few places along the way he sets up altars. Bethel is one of the places, and we see it pop up once again in chapter 13 after Abraham rescues Lot, or no, we are in the process of rescuing Lot. It says, and the place where he journeyed in stages from the Negev to Bethel, to the place where his tent had been in the beginning between Bethel and Ai, the place where he had made an altar at the first, and there Abram called on the Lord. So this is a long callback. We've already seen this place before. Abraham has already established an altar to God here. And that's important to keep in mind because thinking about where is going to be a holy spot. And so we get this kind of situation that you're supposed to remember what happened, but that was months ago. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the recall of this place has already been established as a holy place. And here we enter Jacob's either on the run or traveling, depending on how you see it. And he's going to go to sleep. He takes a rock and puts it under his head like a pillow, which sounds like an awful pillow. And then he has this mystical dream about the gateways to heaven. So with a little bit more context around it, what do you think of this like wild dream that he sees of, it's either a ladder or a stairway, the words kind of interchangeable. Basically this gateway to heaven where angels are coming up and down, and this huge portal, a connection between earth and heaven. What do you all think? Yeah, Larry.
My immediate thought was, well, this certainly tells us, we're down here on earth. Heaven and God are up there in the sky, and that must be where heaven is, because that's the way what the dream says.
Yeah.
Okay, finally got it to work. You know, flashing thoughts coming through. It's like, okay, angels are ascending and descending. So they're the only ones that qualify to make the journey in both directions. And also that you need kind of a portal to access heaven in this story. You know, it confuses me. All right.
Okay.
Wow.
So one of the things to keep in mind is at this point, heaven is not the place where we go for our afterlife. This is not a connection to eternal paradise. This is access to the presence of God.
God, yeah. Okay.
And so, like, remember at this point, there's been no mention of an afterlife. And so, like, when you're dead, like you're the thing that you hope for is a good long life. And then when you're dead, you're dead. This is just people going to and from basically the throne room of God. And if you remember the cosmology that we talked about at the very beginning, where you have the dome, this is basically access to above the dome where God's just kind of hanging out up there.
Okay, gotcha.
Sue, check your sound.
Okay.
Did you have a comment?
Well, this is the first place recently that God is not down walking around and talking. He's more further away. But I don't think Jacob feels that he's further away. He feels that it's comforted in some ways by the knowing that God is still with him.
Right. Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing to think about is, I mean, because we've kind of gone back and forth between like the all-present God who's just kind of everywhere and nowhere, but this like having literally a stairway and an access point really gives God more of a location. And you could almost see how like God and the two angels could come down and then go and check out Sodom and Gomorrah. Where it has kind of a more locality thing. There's an access point. And it almost seems like Jacob has like almost a direct line. And so we have this, oh yeah, Larry.
Well, and the angels don't do anything. All they do is run up and down the ladder. They don't have any big part in the dream.
So, once again, Hebrew word connection. This is all, when I like bring up these connections, it's purely because the ancient Hebrew vocabulary is fairly small. There's always a question when studying languages is, when you think of something new, do you use a word you already know, or do you create a new word? English likes to create new words, which is why we have to Google being both a verb and something we do. Hebrew tends to just expand the meaning of one word and just like make one word stretch farther. The word for angel and the word for messenger is the same. So you could also see it as the messengers of God are going up and down to in and out of heaven. Yeah, Joanna, Gary?
Well, one of the things that I can't help but think of along the way is that they have these dreams, these fantasies, but they're reality. You know, how do you pick and choose which dream is the real one that's in the Bible?
Right.
In here.
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question. They trusted dreams a lot more than we do. We kind of, I mean, thanks to the modern field of psychology, also Freud and his development of like dreams have meaning, but they're not prophecy. A lot of times they trusted their dreams a lot more because they didn't understand how the mind works. But that said, I also know some people who have had some really weird dreams that have kind of circled back in life. My mother-in-law has a fascinating story that I don't know what to do with because it seemed more like a premonition. I don't know what to do with it. So yeah, like where's the line between my dream is weird and my brain's trying to process things, and someone is communicating through my unconscious mind. Do you all have any thoughts on this, where that line is? Do you ever have dreams that seem a little bit too close to reality or a little bit more real and textured than other ones?
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, I dream a lot, so it's like going to the movies every night, but sometimes the cast of characters is, well, currently, my cast of characters is huge, and it's mostly people I don't see anymore. But I'm always looking for what it means, because I have a friend who's always saying, now let's see, what do you think that represents? And I don't really believe in the interpretation of dreams, but I think they're kind of interesting. So I don't think they're premonitions, though. I think they usually reflect anxiety of some kind,
Okay.
or fear.
Any other dream experiences that you all have? I saw a few nods of like dreams.
Lately, my dreams have been so real that they involve people here and interactions here. And when I wake up, I have a hard time separating the dream from reality, because when I'm thinking about something later on in the day, I can't remember whether it actually happened or was part of a dream, because there weren't any fantastical parts in the dream to give it away. Where it's a conversation about something that carries on from a previous conversation. Did it carry on in my dreams, or did it carry on in reality? Sometimes I really don't know. And that's kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah, Gary, were you gonna try to say something?
Well, I understand what Mary Ellen's saying, because I've had that kind of thing where you just have to do a check. Wait a minute, I dreamt that. That didn't really happen.
I know one of the dreams that stuck with me, because it was strange, and it didn't feel like a normal dream, because I'm also a person who dreams a lot and has fantastical dreams. But I was at a conference in Cincinnati, and my dream took place like in the big ballroom. It was this beautiful like 1920s Art Deco style ballroom area. And I was sitting at the bar and my grandfather was sitting there, but he like looked like he was in the 70s, which like my grandfather passed away when I was 14, and I definitely never saw him in his 1970s clothes. And he looked at me and was like, "What are you doing here?" And it was that kind of address and acknowledgement that I was like, "What?" And there was like, it was like, yeah, my brain could have like conjured it, but it was weird to see that recognition out of someone in a dream. And like we had a conversation, and it was just one of those things where it's like, this feels weird. Like this doesn't feel like just like a normal dream. Why would I have brought him in? Why would my brain have thought of this, like, you're not supposed to be here and yet you're here, I'm confused, by someone else in the dream? It was weird. And so that's why I'm like, there may be things I just don't understand in this world, but dreams are strange. And yeah, sometimes the line is hazy. So Jacob sees this thing where his dream is almost like a peek behind the curtain. There's often a sense in different parts in scripture that there's like our material reality, and then there's like a thin veil, and if you get a peek behind it, there's the different spiritual reality. where there are things going on that you can't see. And so this is almost like getting a peek behind the curtain of like what's going on in the divine world. This is what we talk about when we talk about apocalypses. This is a recall from a sermon a long time ago. The word apocalypse, that one is Greek, not Hebrew, but it's an unveiling of spiritual truths. And so this is seen as an apocalyptic event because Jacob is able to look behind the curtain of our material reality and he sees the spiritual reality. So little bit of extra words to put in your tool belt. This is apocalyptic, but that's just because he's seeing the angels and this kind of event. But then, like I said a few moments ago, like there's almost this direct line to talk to God where Abraham just kind of went to sleep, or sometimes we hear this voice from that doesn't really come from anywhere. Jacob sees this and then God starts talking. And so starting in verse 13, we see, and the Lord stood beside him and said, so like God is like all of a sudden standing there. The Lord, remember, that's the name of God. So I am or we would say Adonai, or literally it may be I am Yahweh, literally standing there. And he has this like this whole spiel that he gives, that the land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And it keeps going that you're going to spread out and the earth shall be blessed, and know your offspring. Know that I am with you and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. So we have once again the formula of the covenant. I am giving you this land. You will have offspring and they will be abundant. You will be blessed and the earth shall be blessed through you. And this time we have the addition of I will go with you.
Mhm.
And it's interesting thinking that the Lord stood beside him and said, I'm gonna go with you. What do we think of this whole spiel of God? Yeah, Mary Ellen.
Well, this is the verse 15 that I wanted to discuss. What I'm getting so far before my question is that God is in a particular place or in a limited capacity where he is with them or he cannot be with them. And one of the things that I want to get to, but not till you're ready, but for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. The whole concept of leaving you, rankles, because, in my belief system, in my understanding, is that he's always there. The concept of leaving boggles my mind, so I don't know whether we have evolved in our beliefs to God is always with us. Is that something that is New Testament, or is this, I don't know, you can hear my confusion. I leave it to you.
Okay. Any responses to that before I jump in? Any thoughts?
Interesting thing, I didn't pay any attention to the leaving part. I paid attention to the I'm with you. So I'm thinking God is really in your corner and you don't have to worry. But the thought that he could exit once his purpose has been fulfilled is a little scary. And I wonder if, I don't know, that's interesting.
Yeah. Gary?
I didn't pay attention to that part.
I didn't panic over the word leave, because somehow when I read it as fail thee versus leave. Another, anyway, that was,
Okay.
Mary Ellen mentioned that, I kind of, what? And I ran back, oh yeah, it does say leave. Well,
Okay. So we're going to go Larry, then Clay.
Okay, well, he says, I will not leave you. is what he
until.
says.
I think it changes, I will not leave you until, which
Well,
changes.
yeah. But
Mhm.
which sort of says maybe it's never going to end.
Okay, like
I'm
there's.
not going to leave you until this has all been accomplished.
Mhm. Almost
And
like
maybe it
I
never
like
will be all accomplished.
the accomplishment will be when you're in the grave, and at that point, things are different. Clay, what was your thought?
Yeah, I didn't see it as going that far to the grave. I saw it more as we'll get all of this set up and then you can take it from there.
Oh,
That's the way
okay.
I saw it. But
So,
and in my mind, the Lord will still be with you. It's just Jacob is to carry on after this is all set up.
so the thing to think about is how the covenant has moved from one person to the next through our story already. So the first person to kind of make a deal with God was Noah, and Noah did his thing, and then it kind of like wrapped up. And then like the Noahic covenant is basically don't kill each other. And so that one, we kind of talked about how that kind of applies to all people. But then it sets up with Abraham that God has this bargain and this deal. And God kind of goes around and is with Abraham either directly in the times that God kind of shows up, or kind of passively in that everything works out somehow. But then Abraham gives his blessing to his son. And then God's kind of going around with his son for a while. But thinking of, it's why we started with kind of the recall of last time. Isaac has now blessed Jacob. And if you're thinking there's an argument of how many pagan origins kind of work their way into some of our early stories. If you really are thinking of like God in one location, God who walks around, and this story is leaning into that we have a stairway and God is standing and talking. For God to be standing with Jacob, it means that God actually isn't overseeing Isaac and that part of the family right now. So if you're thinking of location, it's like, I am going to be with you. And then when the blessing gets passed on, I'm going to carry on from there. We're going to keep going. And so the leaving is less of like an abandonment. You can never call on me. Like I changed the number. Don't call. I won't answer. But kind of seeing how the covenant moves through the patriarchs and how it's kind of passed on to the next one with this blessing, if that makes a sort of sense.
Is there any possibility God can handle more than one? Because it sort of looks, it's one at a time, you know.
So this goes into the fact that the story is written by the victors. That what we have is like, there is a nod that God is at work in more places in this story or than what we see in this story. We have it also in the Gospels that like Jesus did more than this. God was active in more places in the world. Like, but this is why it's helpful to think of some of the pagan habits that we see here. Is I think of them less as like, this is untrue, but it's like, how does God communicate to us in a way that we understand? You have to go from a place of understanding. So if God appears in like a one location kind of form, I'm going to be physically here, is it to help the people who are seeing this understand what's going on? And if they're trying to understand a monotheistic deity in a pantheistic world, it might help to kind of have a physical representation, a kind of a locality of God. And so, but what we do see is that this is the story passed on through one line of the family. Kind of as there's branches, we kind of don't pay attention to them as much. I mean, we got Esau marrying Ishmael's daughter. So we kind of have one tie-in, but like we don't know what happened with Cain's family at this point. We don't really have a record of them. And so I think some of this is kind of trying to understand a new idea about God, but having it traced through one family lineage where you're literally going from like one thread of a very big family. If that kind of makes it, that's like a very human understanding of what's going on here. Is that kind of a helpful way to think about it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's much, much later. You can kind of see it develop of this idea that like God is omnipresent, this God that doesn't need a one location. But the like location part of God will last through Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. It lasts into the Judges and even through like King David and King Solomon, because King David literally brings the Ark of the Covenant to the battlefield because it represents the physical presence of God. God is invisible, but thought to be standing on it. So when they bring the Ark of the Covenant out, there is literally thought to be the presence of God above it. It is after that, kind of when Israel is set up a little bit into more like Jesus's time, that we think about God more as this omnipresence, that you don't need a temple to access. As long as the temple's there, there's kind of this understanding that like God is physically present in the temple because that's God's house.
So it had to change once the temple was destroyed. That's when you get rabbinic Judaism.
Right. And that's where you get the two different versions of, is God, like already we've seen God kind of be omnipresent and God be local. It's because when they were hauled off to Babylon, all of a sudden it's more beneficial to think of God as omnipresent. So the line of thinking that developed while they were in exile in Babylon was much more omnipresent God. And then they combined it with a very local God idea of how God is. Yeah, Larry.
A lot of this is sort of like trickle down. You know, God is talking to Jacob, you know, but he's talking about what's going to happen to all of his people. I mean, they're going to populate the earth, they're going to multiply, they're going to be thousands of them, millions of them, namely. So what God is talking to Jacob about isn't just him personally. Well, he's telling him personally what's going to happen to him, but it's going to affect, you know, the world is, or a certain segment of the world.
There is a line of Christian theology that says that if you look at the trajectory, not just like the words of the covenant, but the trajectory of the covenant, it is starting with one person and it fans out. And so that's kind of the Christian understanding, is like Jesus was the final one to like open the floodgates of, okay, we are ready to like make this not just a family, not just one dude, not just a family, not just a like people group, not just a nation, but this is a whole world thing. And it was and that kind of trajectory you can kind of see already here. This is meant to be influenced around the world already. So at verse 16, or Mary Ellen, did we discuss verse 15 enough, at least to give a little bit more of a handhold? Okay. Verse 16, we see Jacob wake up. And his response is, surely this is a place, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know. This is the reference back to what we talked about of Abraham set up a pillar. The way it's formulated, it's kind of implied that one of the rocks that Jacob took to put under his head was literally part of Abraham's pillar. He took one of the holy rocks and made it his pillow, which is why he had this crazy dream, is because he slept on a holy pillar, basically. And so he sets it back up and he pours oil on it, which is the ritual way to make a holy site. So this is the second time that this is designated a holy site. He names it Bethel, because it is the house of God and the gates of heaven. So this is when stories are kind of smushed together. So that was likely one of the endings, but we get a second ending because Jacob wakes up again, which probably means they're just adding a secondary ending from a different source. But you can think of it, he woke up directly after the dream, but it's not morning yet, and he sets up this pillar. But then he wakes up in the morning. That's when he sets up the pillar, pours oil on top of it. He names it Bethel. It has another name because it's right by the city of Lutz. There's another city, or this place has a few names. The thing that I find fascinating is the end of 19 through the end, that Jacob is not just content being blessed by God like his father was. We see that his father before him was just like, okay, I'm the blessed one. Sounds good. And I call him a wet noodle. But we see Jacob here say, if God will be with me and keep me in this way, I will and will give me bread and clothing to wear, I will come again to my father's house in peace, and the Lord shall be my God. And this stone that I have set up, for the stones which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's house, and all that you give me, I will give you 1/10. He tries to make a deal with God. Yeah, go for it.
I've had this covenant theme running through, all of our discussions, and I've questioned all along what the humans' side of a covenant was, because God was offering all of these things, and we called it a covenant, but we didn't have, in my mind, we didn't have a responsibility that the man agreed to take on as his part. And so here we have it.
Here we have it.
Where it's actually, an if-then situation. And to me, this is a clear covenant between man and God. And it's the first one that meets my criteria. So I wanted to get that in there.
Does it make a difference that God hasn't actually okayed this? God gives
That's
God's
true.
end of the bargain, and then Jacob's just like, well, if you do that, then this is what I'm going to do. He kind of makes it after the fact, doesn't he?
Yeah, but there's also the idea of tithing comes in this too. So I'm going to mute out now.
Okay. Other thoughts on Jacob's bargain with God?
Unless God produces his part, he's not going to comply with it.
He's not going to
Right.
give us 10%.
We see this almost feistiness of or in that mindset, it's God, I'm going to hold you accountable. If you don't hold up your end, I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not what Abraham did. Abraham's like, God, when are you going to come through? God, when are you going to come through? And just trusting and asking. And this one's like, God, I will hold you accountable here. You're going to do this or I'm not going to come back.
It also, you can look at it as he's trusting God, that what he is asking of God in his mind is reasonable. And it's just kind of, you say to your friend, if you take care of this, if you get this part of the game, I'll get this part, and you assume that there's agreement because it's a long-standing tradition of how something's handled. So, it is interesting that God doesn't comply. But we've had the reverse where God is doing everything, assuming that man will comply. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Muting.
You definitely see the different personalities of the three patriarchs come out. Yeah, Gary, what's up?
Well, is there any history to the 10th? I just thinking about this you would think there'd be some negotiation, rather than just this arbitrary, I'll give you a tenth.
Yeah,
In most business transactions, a tenth is just a token.
yeah.
Go for it.
Why didn't he have a conversation with God during the dream? Why didn't they work that out as part of the dream rather than this just gets tacked on at the end and it's just a one-way commentary?
So what will make more sense is if you were to take verse 18, or wait, hold on, sorry. Where would the cutoffs be? 13 through 13 through 17 is seen as an insertion. Once again, looking at how God is talked about, Jacob does not call God the Lord when he wakes up and he makes his end of the bargain. So it's seen that 13 through 17 is one version of the story where God says this, and it's just kind of a decree, and so be it, where the other version of the story is seeing it, and then Jacob waking up and making his end of the deal. So that's kind of seeing how like the two stories were woven together. This is likely, once again, a Frankenstein story. So we most likely, even though I've characterized Jacob as trying to barter with God after the fact, it's likely that Jacob saying, I will do these things, was not originally attached to the story of God talking to him in the dream. So.
Okay.
But about the 10th, the 1/10 thing, this is one of the first times I think we've seen it in Genesis that people give a 10th. That was kind of the standard practice of how much to give to gods in worship. You see first fruits that you're supposed to give the first fruit of your harvest, and it's supposed to be around a 10th. We'll see it pop up in Leviticus that you're told to tithe 1/10. A tithe and 10th actually it's just a translation thing. A tithe is 1/10. And so that was just kind of standard practice in the ancient world, and we just see it here. So it's likely a cultural thing of, I will give you the 10th of what I devote to a god, but you're going to get the 10th instead of some other god. So it's that's just kind of standard practice. So with 5 minutes remaining, I want to talk a little bit about the impact or kind of the legacy of Bethel and how it kind of works out later in the story, and why it's actually kind of important that this, I mean, we can all agree, like, this is kind of like a big deal event, right? Like, this is one of the patriarchs talking with God. We've literally seen a portal to heaven. This is one of the stories I heard in Sunday school, and it has good coloring book pages, but we tend to know this. There's even this like string children's game called Jacob's Ladder and other toys and things. However, this has an impact when the kingdom of Israel splits in two. So we're going to fast forward past the exile, past King David, to the point of after King Solomon. When King Solomon dies, his sons cannot figure out who is going to be king, and they actually end up splitting the kingdom kind of right down the middle, and with two halves that are about equal sizes. The lower kingdom is called Judah, and Judah has Jerusalem in it, where the temple is, where like the kind of, it was the capital of the joint kingdom, the unified kingdoms, but becomes the capital of the lower kingdom. And there is where you get a bunch of the righteous kings. When you get into the time of, oh, this was a bad king, this was a good king, all the righteous kings ruled in Jerusalem. You have the northern kingdom, which gets to be confusing because the northern kingdom is called Israel.
Oh,
A lot of the prophets prophesied to Israel. That's actually the northern kingdom. But the northern kingdom is the one that gets Bethel. Bethel becomes the worshiping center for the northern kingdom. it will eventually be engulfed into Samaria. So this is why I bring it up. If you fast forward and you think about Jesus talking with the woman at the well, that conversation,
Mhm.
and she questions Jesus, and she has a question of, which is the right place to worship? You worship in the temple, we worship on the holy mountain. She's talking about Bethel. She's referencing the worshiping spot in this holy site. And so Bethel kind of gets set up as a secondary Jerusalem because of this holy site, because it's seen as, it's literally called the house of God. The temple gets set up somewhere else, but Bethel still has the name, the house of God, and it gets to be in the northern kingdom. And that's why they're butting heads, is because they both think they are the ones that have the presence of God with them.
Hmm.
So this has a lot of import, not just because it's part of Jacob's story, but literally because it sets up the politics for centuries afterwards, because they both argue that they are the true, like, inheritors of God's presence. So
Where is Bethlehem? Where is Bethlehem?
Bethlehem's a little bit west of Jerusalem. It is,
Okay,
it's like
but it's
northwest.
in Judah.
Yeah, it's in Judah, yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, let's see. Nope, that is not it. That was the wrong page. I was checking up on our something there. All right, there we go. Here's the map. So Jerusalem's here. Bethlehem is like right over here in this little area. If you see, Bethel is just above the line between the northern and the southern kingdoms. Mary Ellen, I know you popped out for a little bit. I was quickly explaining why Bethel becomes a holy site and actually a competing Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is the place of the temple, but Bethel is called the house of God, and a secondary worship site is established there. So when the kingdom splits, you see the Israel kingdom up here, which is seen as apostates. They're seen as not being the true worshipers of Yahweh because Yahweh resides in Jerusalem, but they argue that Yahweh is in Bethel. But that is where you also get the difference between the text that says the Lord, which is from down here, which tends to use the proper name of God because Yahweh lives in Jerusalem. Up here, they tend to use El to refer to God because that's just how you say God. And God resides in Bethel.
Okay.
So there is even where you get the different vernacular for the two sets of stories that we combine in here.
Mhm. Neat.
Yeah, I have a Jewish friend who says that they always, in their liturgy or whatever they call it, that God was called El. She never had heard Yahweh or.
Yahweh is an approximation, it's an invention. The Jewish people will either say El, because that's literally just like a straight translation. El is God or gods, like any god gets called El.
Okay.
Yahweh is seen as the proper noun, the proper name, except remember that we don't have the actual vowels to go with it, which is why they use the term Adonai, which means the Lord. So,
Okay. Adonai, okay.
so just a little bit of history to cap things off, but
Yeah.
we are at time. So shall I pray us out for today?
Yeah.
All right.
You're gonna stay on for me afterwards?
Yes, if you have time.
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let us pray. Good and gracious God, we are so thankful that you trusted the world with your presence, and so aren't just a God of one group or one people, but truly a God of all people, that your covenant and your love and your presence can be felt throughout the world today, and we don't have to worry about it running out. We don't worry about your presence leaving us, for God, you tell us in scripture that there is nothing we can do that you will ever leave us. No heights are too high, no depths are too low, but your presence remains with us, and we thank you for that. So I ask that you bless this group, bless their days. Wherever they go, may you follow them in all that they do and be a blessing of peace upon them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, I was just going to say, wherever you go, next week I'll be in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Masada. So while you're doing your Bible study, I'll be doing one too.
You'll be doing a physical Bible
I'll
study.
be doing a physical one.
Oh, we'll enjoy. That'll be amazing.
Yeah, great, great.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Uh-huh.